welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at, you guessed it, the Transformers Legacy Menasor, but this time fully combined. And I'm actually really excited to be taking a look at this guy in his complete form. I mean, we've been building up to this for the best part of 2022. I've taken a look at 5 Stunticons over on the channel, 4 Deluxes, and 1 Smashing Commander. So all that being said, let's get stuck into the details. Here we have Menasor, and he looks fantastic. Now, one of the first things you'll notice when you actually put this guy completely together is how solid and thick he feels. I mean, the plastic is really dense, which again, massive improvement when in comparison to Combiner Wars, but the joints, they are not going anywhere. That is such an improvement. One of my biggest concerns when they announced this guy was that he was going to be a floppy mess like God Neptune, King Poseidon, Volcanicus, etc., but absolutely not. I'm definitely hoping they can adapt something similar if they were to approach Superion in the future, as this is the way to go. Now, in regards to how the Stunticons actually attach onto this guy, I know some of you out there don't like it. Personally, I think for the most part it works well, especially for Dragstrip and Dead End. I think the Stunticon that seamlessly integrates the most would have to be Dragstrip. I love how he kind of really nicely clips on to the shoulder, no gappage at all. That looks fantastic. The same can also be said for this lower section, but we can't say the same about Dead End. There is a little bit of gappage. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but considering that this is a commander, I do think they maybe could have sculpted this just a little better. But I mean, it looks cool. I do like how they actually gave us a split, so it's not one big car hanging off the side of the shoulder when you articulate the elbow. I really do think that was probably the wisest decision to make design-wise. But as we come here to the mid-torso, again, very nicely sculpted. I love how this has all turned out. And now we come here to the legs. Now, I know some of you guys out there don't like the way they actually designed this. I think some of you wish that the cars were actually facing forwards. Personally, I don't mind it all that much. I do like the sculpt work that we have for the shins. I think it's a really nice attention to detail that this has been kind of molded to resemble the underside of both Wild Rider and Breakdown when they're in their vehicle modes. But there is no denying that it does look a little cooler with these facing the front. Now, you can display them facing the front, but the only drawback to that is the knee joints have been specifically designed to move in one way. So if you do rotate the waist, you're not going to be able to utilize these knee joints at all. I'm almost certain that a third-party company are very quickly working on an upgrade kit for this, but as it stands officially, if you want the cars facing forwards from kind of the waist down, he's basically going to be a brick, which is a little shame. But I mean, these look cool. Now, I am going to touch base with just kind of the individual Stunticons themselves. I know some of you guys thought that I was a little too harsh in their initial reviews, and the only reason that is because they don't actually become limbs per se. I mean, in the case of these two, they're essentially additional armaments, and for Breakdown and Wild Rider, they are glorified gap fillers. So I really do think Hasbro could have worked a little better magic on the individual modes, as to me at least, 3 out of the 5 are pretty weak, those being Dead End, Wild Rider, and Breakdown, and it is really only Dragstrip and Motormaster, which I think look really cool in bot mode. So that was the reason why I was really critical in their individual reviews. But like I said in the end of the breakdown video, they look their best combined. They look so sick when they're fully assembled, and definitely really cool. Now, articulation for this guy, he does have a swivel here at the head. I do kind of wish it was a ball joint, especially for a commander, and he does slightly suffer from the Legacy Laser Prime syndrome in the sense that the shoulders kind of block his vision, which in terms of posing can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. We do get some decent ratchet joints here out of the shoulders. Now, this side, which actually hooks onto Dead End, is really sturdy, but sadly the same can't be said for the Dragstrip side. It doesn't take much at all to hinge this down, and you'll see more of that when I peg the sword in. So here we have the sword, and as you can see, it does just want to droop down, which I think is such a shame, especially considering that the core figure was a commander. I wish these were as sturdy as the hips, as the arms are really going to be the piece that you're moving around the most. But with that being said, we do get a very heavy-duty ratchet joint clicking out to the side. Not the biggest fan of the design. I kind of wish they could have added an almost gap filler like we saw with the 86 Voyager Ironhide. We do get a nice soft ratchet joint going left to right, a 90-degree bend here at the elbow, and like I said previously, I do like how the actual Stunticons for the arms can be split into 2 pieces, as it would have looked a little strange having the solid car just kind of hanging out to the side with the elbow bent. So I thought that was cool. For some strange reason, the hands are actually ratcheted, and whilst we're talking about the hands, I do think these are a little bit of a downgrade. These are part of a commander class, and for those who recall, with some of the Gen Select combiners, they did actually begin to give us proper articulating fingers, so I definitely think that is something we could have seen with this guy, but it is what it is. I guess we'll just have to wait for that upcoming DNA design kit. We do get a very nice waist joint which can rotate the full 360. That is fantastic. The hips can kick forwards that far, which is awesome. They can also kick back all the way, very heavy duty. We do get a soft click which can hinge, I want to say, roughly to 90, so that is fantastic. He's going to absolutely decimate the Autobots on the battlefield. A thigh rotation, as well as a 90-degree bend here at the knee. I will mention, however, that a few times when I've actually posed this, the connection joint between the thigh and the knee does have a tendency to slide off. I kind of wish that it would have had to have been manually detached, in the sense that you would have actually had to lift this piece up to free the joint instead of just basically pulling it out. I do think that maybe could have been worked a little better. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but was just something I noticed. And we also do get a fantastic ratchet joint, which, depending on how far you kind of angle it out, can also pivot forwards, which, trust me guys, when getting this guy into some of those more dynamic poses, he's super awesome. So articulation, definitely really cool, but I do just wish that the shoulders in particular could have been a little better, and I would have loved to have gotten some individual finger articulation and maybe a slightly different mechanism designed for the back of the knees. And now we turn to firepower, and this too is where I have some comments about just the combiner in general. But to start things off, the individual Stunticon weapons can actually be attached in the combined form, which I thought was awesome. So we get the dual pistols of both Drag Strip and Dead End on the forearms, which I think looks sick. And then here for Wild Rider, they do store on the back of the leg, and for Breakdown, it does actually peg into the underside of kind of this front piece. So that's awesome. I do think they kind of missed the trick though. They could have given us an almost combining weapon gimmick, especially as that was hinted very early on in the first couple of waves of core class, but it is what it is. In terms of actual weapons that you're meant to use here for the combined mode, we really and truly just get this sword. Now, like I mentioned in the Motormaster review, for a commander class figure, I think they could have given us two swords. This size for Motormaster when in his individual bot form, and then an additional one that is much larger for Menasor to wield in combined form. As it stands, this to me looks very puny and dainty, and I know there's going to be an upgrade kit coming out, but come on, Hasbro definitely could have given us a bigger sword, especially for that hefty commander price point. And talking of hefty, here we have my biggest issue with this combiner as a whole, and it's parts forming, additional pieces left over. To me, this is just so lazy and a little irritating. I like to have my figures in one accumulative piece when on the shelf. I like to be able to take them off the shelf, move them to different parts of the house, and if I want, disassemble them, etc., and not have to go hunting for other pieces which you have to detach in order to get to the combined mode. I mean, this is a big chunk. It's not like it's a small tiny blaster. This is a huge part of the trailer, and I definitely think they could have engineered this into the back of the legs or something. I just don't like this at all, and the actual gun he comes with to me is really bad. I mean, yes, you can have him dual wielding this when in the combined mode, but who's really going to display him with this? This is pretty pointless in my opinion, and as an individual gun, I mean, come on guys, it looks terrible. Not only does it not match up with the aesthetic of this guy at all, in the sense that it has no sculpted in detailing on the top. I understand why it's for the trailer, but it just does look ridiculous. I mean, I would have much rather had them given us that massive kind of insectoid gun that he had in the G1 show. Sorry, I'm not too familiar with the name, but I do think that would have looked a lot cooler. Now, some of you guys did ask me when I put out that community post if there was a way for Menasor to have this additional piece integrate in the bot form, and technically there is. So if we come around to the back, here we have the trailer hitch that you'd use for vehicle mode, and this is actually the trailer port. So you're going to want to open this up, take these sections here and angle them to the sides, and I'm sorry to say, but the only thing I found is to basically just attach it like that, and it kind of creates this massive wing look for Menasor, which I know it doesn't look the best, but this was the only thing I could find. And DNA Design again are coming to save the day. They're going to give us a ton of upgrades to actually turn this into this almost massive cannon that he can hold with both hands, which I think is going to look cool. But considering how very nicely engineered the rest of the figure was, I would have loved for them to have just given it that chef's kiss, and for this to have integrated into the figure somehow else. Now, as we take a look at a few comparisons, we have Menasor compared alongside the G2 Ruination, which is basically the Bruticus mold for those who have that original version in their collection, and he is actually bigger than Ruination, which I wasn't expecting at all. Here we have him alongside the Power of the Primes / Generation Selects Volcanicus, and in terms of stability, Menasor absolutely takes a massive dump on Volcanicus. Menasor is a brick in comparison to how loose and floppy that Volcanicus was, so safe to say, definitely a massive improvement in regards to how this combiner was formed. Here we have him alongside the Commander Class Siege Jetfire, and again, he's actually a little bigger when in comparison to Jetfire. And finally, in terms of massive combiners, here we have him alongside the Combiner Wars Devastator. So not as big as Devastator, but definitely pretty up there in terms of scale. And again, much like some of the previous combiners that I've compared him alongside, way sturdier than what was a Titan class. And here, for a slightly smaller comparison, we have him alongside some of the core Season 1 Decepticons, Megatron, Starscream, Shockwave, and Soundwave. And then finally, Earthrise Optimus, Voyager Studio Series Ironhide, and Netflix Deluxe Bumblebee. And I would absolutely love to give you guys a comparison between this Menasor and the Combiner Wars version. However, sadly, I don't own it in the collection, so I'm sorry, but these are just going to have to do. Now, before we go ahead and wrap up this review, I did actually ask you guys in the community tab to ask me questions to answer in this Menasor review, and some of them I definitely thought were worth touching base with in this video. So one of the biggest questions I received was if it was possible to swap out the Stunticons with one another, and it kind of is yes and no. You can't swap Dragstrip out with Dead End just because the undersides are differently designed. I mean, this one has different size tabs to this one, so you can't have Dragstrip on this side and vice versa with Dead End, but you can do it with both Wild Rider and Breakdown. So if you wanted Breakdown on this leg and Wild Rider on this side, yes, you can absolutely do it because they are the same mold as one another and they connect and attach in exactly the same way. And following on from that question, I was also asked quite a lot if it was possible to combine this guy with the previous Combiner Wars style, and technically yes. I mean, you can take the legs off a previous combiner and attach it onto this guy, so let's get stuck straight into it. So they do utilize a very similar locking mechanism, so we'll just slide the legs here off Menasor, and I have brought both of the ones from the Ruination combiner, so let's just snap that one in. Now, they don't actually click in as securely when in comparison to these, just as the tabs or the pegs are slightly differently sized, but it will hold in there pretty secure. We can then take this other leg and slide this one into place, and as you guys can see, there we have Menasor with the Ruination lower half of the legs, and he does look pretty nuts. And I mean, you could probably have a lot of fun with this if you had a few of those other Combiner Wars combiners. So yes, this is technically possible, but it's nowhere near as much of a tight connection when in comparison to the actual legs which are designed for this guy. And in terms of scale, I mean, it's very much off. These are way too short and stubby when in comparison to the longer legs that are specifically intended for Menasor. And wrapping up on this review for the combined mode of the Transformers Legacy Menasor. Overall, I think this is a really nicely done figure. I mean, definitely one of the best combiners that we've seen in the main line for quite some time. At least from my own personal experience, it obliterates the previous Combiner Wars versions just because this actually can stand up without requiring any additional support just in a standard vanilla pose. You can articulate this as much as you could a Deluxe Voyager and Leader, and I don't worry about the hips giving way or this guy toppling over, etc. I do like how the vast majority of the Stunticons actually attach to the skeleton. I know there'll be some out there that do wish you could still utilize the ratchet joints in the knees when having the cars kind of inverted and facing forwards, but we'll no doubt see an upgrade kit come out later down the line. My biggest issue with this guy would be the weaponry and kind of that front portion of the trailer not really having a place to go when in the combined form. I definitely think they could have engineered that into the combined mode to kind of get rid of any excess pieces just floating around. I really don't like it when there are additional components that you have to carry with you in order to transform the combiners from either robot to vehicle or into combined mode, etc. And I definitely think for the Commander class price point, Motormaster should have come with not only a sword for his robot mode, but definitely a much larger sword for the combined mode, and it would have been cool had they somehow given us that kind of insectoid gun that he had in the series. But other than that, definitely a really cool combiner, one that I think was worth the wait, with the exception of Breakdown kind of falling flat on his face as being the final Stunticon, but the rest of them I think as a whole they're cool. Definitely Motormaster and Dragstrip are the shining two out of the five, with Dead End, Wild Rider and Breakdown not being as great. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.